Hi everyone, I'm Kara, the editor of Storyworks Junior. Thanks so much for joining me for the video read aloud for this issue's nonfiction feature, Escape from Alcatraz. It's about a prison in San Francisco that's now closed, but many years ago, 3 prisoners pulled off an amazing escape, and you'll hear all about it. The author of this story is Deborah Hopkinson, who did an incredible job of giving you the details you need to really understand what life at Alcatraz was like and what it took for those prisoners to break free. I edited the story, which means I made sure that it was written in a way that was clear enough for you to understand and exciting enough to keep you interested. So, you ready for Alcatraz? Here we go.
At exactly 9:30 on the night of June 11, 1962, the lights at Alcatraz prison went out. Most of the men living there shivered on their thin beds as they tried to fall asleep. But not Frank Morris. He waited for the prison to get quiet. His heart was pounding. If his plan worked, he would never sleep in this prison again. For months, Morris and 3 other prisoners, Alan West and brothers Clarence and John Anglin, had been secretly planning to escape. This prison sat at the top of an island in the middle of San Francisco Bay. People said it was impossible to break free from the Rock, as Alcatraz was known. Morris and his friends had come up with a clever plan. They had been using tiny tools to chip away at the walls of their cells. They made holes big enough for them to crawl through. Then the men climbed up the pipes behind their cells. They found a place to set up a secret workshop. Morris had already escaped from several prisons, but Alcatraz was different. Security was tight. Guards counted the inmates many times each day and night. So Morris and his friends made dummy heads to fool them. On the night of their escape, they tucked the fake heads into their beds. In the low light, the heads looked real. Now, as darkness settled over Alcatraz, everything was ready. Well, almost. At the last minute, West couldn't get out of his cell. So Morris and the Anglin brothers left without him. They wriggled out of their cells and climbed up plumbing pipes. Next, they stepped onto the roof. They crawled across quietly and scrambled down a drain pipe. They made sure to stay out of the way of the prison's bright searchlight. Finally, the men were out. The salty breeze from San Francisco Bay blew against their faces. The men still had to climb a 15-foot fence and get through the crashing, shark-filled waters of the bay. Land was over a mile away. Inmates had made it this far before, but then they'd drown or go back because of the tough waves. Morris took a deep breath. Could they pull off the most daring escape in the history of Alcatraz? During the 1930s, there were many robberies and murders in the United States. Many people thought that the country needed a super prison. Alcatraz seemed like the perfect place to lock up these criminals. That's because it sat by itself on a tiny island 1.5 miles from shore. Alcatraz opened as a federal prison in August 1934. Wardens at other prisons were told that Alcatraz would take their biggest troublemakers. By the end of the year, Alcatraz was the home of more than 200 criminals. A prisoner at Alcatraz lived in a difficult world. Prisoners banged on bars. No newspapers were allowed. Inmates could only listen to certain radio shows. They had to wake up at 7 a.m. The men stood to be counted, then cleaned their cells. At the shriek of a whistle, they marched in one line to breakfast. After breakfast, guards counted the forks, knives, and spoons. They had to make sure no one used them later as weapons. During the day, guards marched the inmates to jobs in places like the laundry room and the garden. The prisoners were counted all the time. Lights out was at 9:30 p.m. on the dot. By 1963, it was too expensive to keep the prison open. The government shut it down. Today, Alcatraz is a landmark run by the National Park Service. More than 1 million tourists visit every year. So what about escapes? Alcatraz was a federal prison for 29 years. During that time, 36 men tried to escape. 23 were caught, 6 were killed, and 2 drowned. Experts believe the 2 others who tried to escape were swept out to sea. That leaves 3 men, Frank Morris and John and Clarence Anglin. After the night of June 11, 1962, they were never seen or heard from again. There was a big search for the men. Some people thought they escaped safely. But in the end, officials said that the men had drowned. In fact, a body was found floating in the bay, but no one was able to figure out who it was. People have wondered about the men for years. There are still rumors that they are alive. Some people say they've seen them, but there's no proof. Do you think Morris and the Anglin brothers made it? Or did they die in the rough waters of San Francisco Bay?